Ancient Babylonians did math in base 60 instead of base 10. That's why we have 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. The guard of the tomb of the unknown soldier does not wear any rank insignia so as to not outrank any of the unknown soldiers. J.K. Rowling wrote a real person into the Goblet of Fire, the girl named Natalie MacDonald, a Harry Potter fan who was dying of leukemia while Rowling was still writing the book. You see her character as a first year who dons the sorting hat and is sorted into Gryffindor. Iceland is the only country in the world without mosquitoes. Many puzzle manufacturers reuse the dies which cut their puzzles into pieces, so pieces from one can fit into another, and one man has turned this into an art. Enity Camaria, a Staten Island restaurant that only employs grandmothers to cook traditional food from their homelands. Morgan Freeman converted his 124-acre ranch into a giant sanctuary to protect honeybees. The Queen has been the face of so many currencies and has reigned for so long that it is possible to observe her aging process on Commonwealth banknotes. Mel Brooks wore a fake sixth finger to get his handprint in the sidewalk at Grauman's Chinese Theater. The taste map of the tongue that many people learned in school is nonsense. Taste receptors for salty, sweet, bitter and sour are found all over the tongue. Saudi Arabia only abolished slavery in 1962 under pressure from the USA and Great Britain. The Florida Man phenomenon exists because freedom of information laws in Florida make it easier for journalists to obtain information about arrests from the police than in other states. An ancient underwater temple, originally considered a myth, was discovered in India after a deadly tsunami parted the sea, revealing its location. In the 1950s, a scientist used a mirror to focus the energy from a nuclear explosion to light his cigarette. Over 1.3 million Indian soldiers fought for the British in World War I. Alexander the Great encouraged his men to shave, so that enemies couldn't grab their beards during combat. Certain languages lack any word for left/right and instead use the cardinal directions to express orientation on a small scale. The cup is to the north of me. The first recorded instance of a person living in 3 centuries was that of Margaret Ann Neave, a woman from the British island of Guernsey who lived from 1792 to 1903. By claiming her breast implants were big and impractical, an exotic dancer in the US was able to get the IRS to agree that they were a business expense for her tax return. Ducks can adjust their penis size based on how many female ducks are around. The Australian government owns all koalas like how China owns all pandas. Despite being a popular trope in crime fiction, it's basically impossible to quickly incapacitate someone with a chloroform-soaked rag. It generally takes about 5 minutes of inhaling the substance to render someone unconscious. One of the singers of Africa by the band Toto was also the singing voice of adult Simba in The Lion King, and he is the son of composer John Williams. Alberta, Canada is the largest inhabited landmass that has no rat population. Every territory surrounding it has rats, but high rat control efforts have kept them out.
Let me in! Let me in!
Humans put a man on the moon, 1996, before putting wheels on luggage, 1970. Scientists created a sound so loud that it can instantly boil water. Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise of all time, bigger than Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thousands of years ago, Madagascar was home to lemurs the size of gorillas. At the outbreak of the Second World War, zookeepers killed all the poisonous insects and snakes in London Zoo. In case it was bombed and they escaped. Dogs wag their tails with a right bias in positive situations and with a left bias in negative situations. Heroin became popular among American soldiers during the Vietnam War because it was easier to take secretly than marijuana. The blue M&M replaced the tan M&M in 1995. People had the option to vote on which color they wanted to replace tan with, and blue won with 54% of the votes. Willie Nelson's first wife, Martha Matthews, was quite violent towards him. At one point she sewed him up in bed sheets and beat him with a broomstick. Mick Jagger once sought help from a Shrek's addiction therapist, but ended up seducing the therapist. Due to some missing paperwork, Ohio wasn't legally a state until 1953, 150 years after the Ohio Constitution was presented to Congress. Rats become more emotionally resilient when they are taught how to drive a small vehicle. Ernest Hemingway ended up being quarantined for most of the summer with his wife and his mistress in 1926. Many buildings in the Roman Forum were reasonably intact until the Renaissance. Several temples and arches were destroyed to provide building materials for St. Peter's Basilica and other projects. The early YouTube hit "Charlie Bit My Finger" was found on Osama bin Laden's computer by the CIA after his death. Female dragonflies will fake their own death to avoid unwanted advances from male dragonflies. Take Poo to the Loo was an Indian social media campaign led by UNICEF to combat the country's problems with open defecation. Moldy bread was used to treat infected wounds more than 2,000 years ago in ancient China, Greece, Serbia and Egypt. Rabbits can smell their dead relatives in the feces of predators. In 1963, someone in East Berlin escaped to West Berlin by stealing a tank and driving it through the Berlin Wall. Little Richard sang the Magic School Bus opening theme song. Da Vinci was given a vineyard as payment for making The Last Supper, which was bombed in World War II, and the DNA of those vines is being used to recreate the wines he had. Since sleep talking is not a product of a conscious or rational mind, it is usually inadmissible in court. The Chihuahua was bred for food and as a heat pad by ancient Aztecs and Mayas. There are more fried chicken restaurants in Korea than there are McDonald's and Subways, combined globally. Phobos, one of the Martian moons, is slowly spiraling inward to eventual destruction, and Mars will eventually have a ring. The oldest still existing university in the world from around 800 AD was founded by a woman. Donut dollies, women who traveled through war zones to serve donuts to troops during World War II. Tuna fish create so much heat while fighting being caught that they can cook themselves alive. There is a church in Scotland which has a gargoyle in the shape of a xenomorph from the Alien movies. The word abracadabra was originally used in ancient Rome as a cure for malaria. It wasn't spoken as we use it today, however it was written on papyrus and worn in a vial around the neck. Washing Machine Charlie, a World War II Japanese pilot who would fly by American bases at night with unsynchronized engines which would wake up the Americans. Smokers are exposed to some of the highest levels of radiation on Earth from the radioactive traces of polonium and lead in tobacco. A dolphin and false killer whale can mate and create a hybrid wolfin. There is ice on the surface of Mercury despite it being the closest planet to the sun in our solar system and therefore one of the hottest. A fire station burnt down in Norfolk, England in 2014 because it didn't have sprinklers. 2% of people have a defective ABCC11 gene, aka their sweat doesn't smell. Mexican drug cartels are fighting over a multi-billion avocado industry. Taking leftovers from a restaurant was considered a breach of etiquette for a long time, with restaurants providing doggy bags for bones to be taken to pets. The real name of Shaggy from the Scooby-Doo series is Norville Rogers. The Cherokee Nation fought with the Confederacy during the American Civil War. Dogs can be right or left-pawed just like humans. James Franco has a mutation on a gene that allows him to sleep for about half the time that we normally need. Kill Switch, an urban legend of a game supposedly with only 5,000 copies that would self-delete after completion. The US court confirmed that Snuggies are blankets, not clothes. In 2006, a woman farted on a plane and tried to cover up the smell by lighting matches, causing an emergency landing. Berries are simple fruits stemming from one flower. This means that pineapples, bananas, watermelon, pumpkins, and avocados are berries. The package saver is the name of the little plastic table that goes into the middle of pizza boxes. The Apollo astronauts' distinctive hopping on the moon wasn't due to the low gravity, it was because their spacesuits were inflexible. Pooping is one of the required characteristics for something to be classified as alive. The common pigeon is the 7th fastest animal on the planet, the cheetah ranks 12th. Early Italian Renaissance people, such as Leonardo da Vinci, have not seen nor tried tomatoes in their lives. Cockroaches are social and when they are in groups they make decisions collectively. Birds' knees don't bend backwards, we are just looking at their angles. A map needs only 4 colors to ensure that regions with common borders do not have the same color. The Iranian word for ostrich is shotamorg, which translates to camel chicken. Ricky Gervais was a 1980s pop sensation in the Philippines. Disney Epcot regularly grows lemons the size of milk jugs. The world record holder for fastest downing of a yard beer was the Prime Minister of Australia, Bob Hawke. For the past 2 years it is no longer criminal in Canada to challenge somebody to a duel, except a challenge to a duel or provoke somebody to challenge another person to a duel. Adjusted for inflation, the entire US Apollo lunar program only cost $288 billion over its lifetime. The surface of the moon is actually dark, although compared to the night sky it appears very bright, with a reflectance just slightly higher than that of worn asphalt. Dung beetles navigate via the Milky Way, the first known species to do so in the animal kingdom. Facebook's primary color is blue because Zuckerberg is red-green colorblind, a realization that occurred after a test undertaken around 2007. Cave painters use the flickering fire as an early form of animation. Prior to being given its formal description, the Lithranax tyrannosaur genus was referred to as nipple-butt tyrannosaur. If a child's fingertip gets severed off, a new fingertip may regrow. Advil has a candy coating. Video games have been found to be more effective at battling depression than therapy.